listening to Para X.
To wear the horn was the crest when you were born. Your father's father wore it, and your father wore it too. Hallanto, Johnny Rumbelow, we were up long before the day to welcome in the summertime, welcome in the May. The summer is a coming in, and winter's gone away. Robin Hood and Little John have both gone to the fair, oh, and we shall to the merry greenwood to hunt the buck and hare, oh, Hallanto, Jolly Rumbelow, we were up long before the day, oh, to welcome in the summertime, welcome in the May, oh, for summer is a coming in, and winter's gone away. What happened to the Spaniard, the maids so brave, the boast, oh, that they shall eat the feathered goose, we shall eat the roast, oh, Hallanto, Jolly Rumbelow, we were up long before the day, oh, to welcome in the summertime, welcome in the May, oh, for summer is a coming in, and winter's gone away. With all their power and might, oh, and send their peace upon us, bring peace by day and night, oh, Hallanto, Jolly Rumbelow, we were up long before the day, oh, to welcome in the summertime, welcome in the May, oh, for summer is a coming in, and winter's gone away.
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, Merry Meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the Para X Radio Network. Tonight's opening song was Hallanto by Dave the Bard, and the song talks about welcoming in the May. And that's exactly what we'll be doing in a couple of weeks. On May 30th, Dave will be here to help welcome in the May and Beltane, and also share some brand new songs off his new, just released album called Sabbath. So you'll hear Sabbath on the Sabbath, and a whole lot more. So I hope you can join us then. Now tonight, it's time to get out your work gloves and trowel, because we're going to do a little cyber gardening. My guest is Mandy Mitchell, who knows a whole lot about magical plants and gardens, because she's the author of the Hedgewitch Book of Days, which is a lovely book full of spells and rituals and recipes for the magical year. And since ours is a nature-based religion and our Wheel of the Year is based on the annual cycle of seasonal festivals, the bounty of the land comes into play in both sowing and reaping. And that means getting down to basics, digging around in the dirt, being one with Mother Earth, and getting hands-on in creating beautiful gardens, planting food to harvest, and watching beautiful floral plants come to bloom. And who better than a hedge witch to talk to about this? Mandy, welcome back.
Hi Marla, lovely to be with you tonight.
This is a topic that first of all, I was kind of nudged at one point to consider doing a show on that, and I thought about it, and I thought, who do I know that can do a show like that? And all of a sudden, you jumped into my head, and there you were, and you were there. You came to the rescue. So thank you so much. But you do talk about a lot of gardening and planting and cooking and stuff in your books, and I was reading your April blog the other day where you talk about having moved last year to a place that had a 70-year-old garden with not a single plant in it.
Yes,
so,
right.
What does a hedge witch do with such a blank canvas? Do you draw up a plan, or do you just play it by ear and plant whatever suits your fancy at the time? How do you go about turning it into a lovely garden?
Oh, I mean, first of all, I'm really blessed to be having a garden at all. I mean, so many people would love a garden and don't have one. So I'm very blessed, as we all are, if we've got a little patch that we can tend and work. It's the new garden. Yes, you're right. I've just broken the ground of the new garden, and I have to say, gardening is my passion. I absolutely love being outside, as a hedge witch does. But to tend your little plot of earth, there's something really ancient about that, which I love, and it's a really meditative thing. So I think when I was started to plan the garden, it was a really meditative process. For me, it was looking at what the garden was, elementally, what space I had, where the sun fell, and the general feel of the garden as well, because it's really important, if you're planting a garden, to look at where you're planting and the environment that your plants will be in. I think that it's arid plants, sun-loving plants are fantastic, but if you've got a shady garden, they're not going to work. They're not going to thrive. And equally, there's plants in other regions that might work really well in your garden if you do a little bit of research. But I think a lot of planning of garden comes from the heart, and I think the space speaks to you more than you kind of decide what to do. I've literally just put some plants in today. I've been planting lavender today, and it's like there's like this hand that guides you around the garden to show you where you should be. It's almost like I think it should go somewhere, but somebody else thinks it should go somewhere else. So it evolves. The garden evolves, but that's Mother Nature, isn't it, Marla? I mean, it evolves. It changes. Gardens aren't stationary. We can never plan for Mr. Slug and Mrs. Snail little attack on our plants, but nature's always moving, and that cycle in nature affects our gardens as much as it does outside of our gardens in the hedgerows. So it's a real celebration, I think, of everything seasonal when you start a garden. And so I just feel very blessed to have one. I've moved, as said, last year, and for 2.5 years before that I didn't have a garden, and I missed it terribly. Yes. You kind of make do with the windowsill garden, and that can be equally as enchanting, and can, it can be so beneficial to have plants around the house. But there is something magical about getting your hands in that, now the sun's come out, in that warm earth. Yes. I know you've been really fortunate. You've had sun for quite a while where you are. I know equally Tim was full of winter last time I spoke to you. So I hope he's got some spring now. But spring's definitely sprung here in the UK, and everything is in bloom, and the blossom is out. And it's a magical thing to be outside in that and be part of creating a space that you can use for all of your practices, for ritual, for growing medicinal herbs, but just it's something so restorative about being in a garden that I'm blessed in a way. Although there's not one plant in my garden when I moved here, it gave me a complete blank canvas to start with, which is so unusual. I mean, I don't know about over there, but certainly here, with the age of the houses, most gardens have been worked at some point. So you will get somebody else's energies, ideas, and whatever. So, which is lovely, it can give a garden real character, but to have a completely blank canvas is so unusual. My little patch of earth is getting fuller by the day. I am a bit of a garden centre junkie, I have to admit, and the plants keep sneaking in through the back gate and popping themselves into the ground, and it's looking pretty. It's looking very pretty, and I can't wait for it to come to bloom in the summer. It's really exciting.
And you were just talking about, plants popping themselves into the ground. And it amazes me because sometimes they do have a mind of their own. And Tim and his wife Nancy 2 years ago sent me a beautiful bare root rose, a floribunda bare root. And it scared the heck out of me because I'd never grown a rose from bare root. And because I always had in my house, I always had gardens. And then when I moved here, I didn't have a garden. So I was really craving something. And they were kind enough to pick up on that and send me this beautiful rose that I thought I was going to immediately kill. So I got a big pot and I put it in the pot and I talked to it. And I said, please don't die on me. Please don't die on me. This rose in 6 months had turned into this luscious, multi-blooming, beautiful bush. I keep sending Nancy pictures of it because it's just amazing. But the thing of it is about planting themselves, he's in a 5-gallon pot. Yeah. And I don't know why I just called him a he, but I guess he must be. Yeah. So, but I got to thinking about it, and there just wasn't any way this rose could bear so beautifully and wonderfully being in a pot. It could happen, but still. And so I went and took a peek, and this sweet rose sent out a taproot through the bottom of the pot and into the earth. So he planted himself, and that's why he's so lush and beautiful, and they do have a mind of their own sometimes, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. And that's such a wonderful story because it fights to get out of the constraint and puts its feet first and says, no, I'm staying here. And that just sums up the energy of plants. It's you can plant a plant wherever you want to do it, but if that plant's not happy, it won't thrive. It won't flower. It won't be abundant for you. It won't ring. I know that Tim was talking about vibrations and energies in the last hour, and that's the whole essence of gardening: the vibrations and the energies of the plants. And if you put it somewhere where it's not happy, like us, I suppose, when you're in chilly old winter and you've got no coat, you're not happy, you're not comfortable, you're not going to thrive. And plants are the same. And I love that with your rose. I am a bit of a rose collector, and certainly, obviously, English roses over here. We're famous for our roses over here. Yes. And I think I've got 5 so far in the garden, and I am addicted to them. They are beautiful. But temperamental. But if you've got them and you've put them in the right place, years and years and years of beautiful blooms. You'll be rewarded for such a long time. And your he plant that you've got obviously sounds like he's well settled in.
Yes, he is. I'm sure of it. He's taken over. He's like the focal point because I don't have any other dirt to dig in, but I have a huge table that I have all these plants on. And so it's close to being a garden, but it's certainly better than having nothing, and I was going nuts without it. So I'm loving it. Your preference is, you said, for traditional English gardens, full of fragrance and color and texture. And, where you live in the world makes a big difference, too, because I think I'm as eclectic with my garden as I am as being a witch. And being in Southern California and so near to the desert, I love cactus and I love succulents. And the stranger they look, the better. I've had some that are covered in fur and some that look like brains and some that look deadly.
There's really weird types, isn't there?
I love them all. And then, of course, I tried the carnivorous plants, the Venus flytraps and the pitcher plants, but it's not a humid enough climate, I think. But I also love flowers and fragrances. So at the moment, I've got jasmine, I've got geraniums, I've got roses in bloom. So, I think it's whatever strikes your fancy when you go into a nursery or something. And you see something that you would not try before or you didn't know about or something. and it just kind of winks at you, I think you need to grab it and run.
Absolutely, and I do tend to do that more often than not. Unfortunately, I sneak them in. Try not to let my husband see them. I try and sneak them in. But the whole essence of the gardens that I love is that kind of. I know it's very chocolate boxy cottage thing, but it's what I suppose harking back to Victorian times here, where gardens were worked for all sorts of things, for the medicinal properties, and also the fruit and vegetables were grown alongside all the beautiful flowers, and it's all very jumbled and quite free and natural, and I like that because it really represents a kind of uncontained garden, if that makes sense, because it's kind of hard to be uncontained in a garden, but there's a freeness to it. There's a jostle for positions and colours, and my favourite thing, I have to say, is scent. And I'm very conscious when I'm planting a garden of it being very sensory. I think you're working with a 3D thing. You can plan as much as you like on paper, but it has to attach to all your senses. And as we know, as witches, we have lots of senses that we don't actually use with the 5 normal ones, and it has to speak to all of our senses, especially with the path that we follow. It has to ring out magically to us. It has to have an essence or a use that we would see in the mundane plant that other people wouldn't necessarily see. And I think that's one of the joys of being a gardening witch, is that you can have something very, very mundane that nobody else would give another look to, but you know that you can use that, and you know what it's good for, and it's there for a purpose. Like the little old daisy that sits on the edge of the lawn, that people think, oh, we haven't cut the grass properly, but actually, you know that daisy that could be made into a daisy chain that will protect the children from the fae coming and taking them away. All these old folklores. But also medicinally, the leaf of the daisy, if you've got a mouth ulcer, just putting a leaf of a daisy on it will help heal it and soothe it. Just all these old little things that other people wouldn't necessarily know, but it's there for a reason, if that makes sense.
It does. Now, you talked about creating a hedgerow, which can, in addition to bear some edible and magical goodies, can also create a connection with other realms. Now, how would one go about doing that?
Well, the connection with other realms, hedgerows, any sort of boundary is what us hedge witches is all about, I suppose. And the hedgerow outside of our gardens is where we normally gravitate to. In a garden, it's so much harder because your boundary tends to be a static fence. Certainly here, anyway, we don't tend to have hedgerows between our houses. We have fences or walls or, something that's very solid and immovable. So creating that realm, that crossover in your garden, it does take a little bit of foreplanning, and also a lot of thinking about what our grandmas used to say or do. Any folklore that comes about from plants. But often although it's not a visible boundary to other people, if you know your plants and you know the areas of your garden, that boundary can be something as subtle from the light side of the garden to the shady side. So that crossover boundary can be a really important place to find the other realms. One of the nicest things to do in a garden, I don't know if you agree, Marlo, is to welcome the fae.
Yes.
And I always find they're a fantastic connection to other realms. So when I'm planting a garden, I try and remember some of the plants that the fae particularly love, because they're obviously associated with pretty much all plants in some shape or form. Here in the UK at the moment, we've got in the woods, it's bluebell time. So, and they're particularly associated with bluebell. In fact, the UK, actually, I found out today, the UK's got half the world's populations of bluebell.
Wow.
So, and they're beautiful, and they have a special affinity with me because my mum loved the bluebells, and when she passed on, and she wanted to be scattered in the bluebells, so she is now. Oh. And so whenever the bluebells come up, obviously I always think of Mum. So for a boundary for me in my garden, my plan is to create the boundary for me to cross over into the realm. Is I have one side of the garden that crosses into shade. And so, obviously, bluebells being a woodland plant, they love shade. They're associated with the fae, so they attract the fae into the garden. And it is said that if you hear a bluebell ringing, that it's a malicious fairy. I don't know how true that actually is. I'm also fortunate, actually, my neighbour on the right-hand side of me has lilac trees in his garden. And so the scent of the lilac attracts the fae as well. Forget-me-nots. Forget-me-nots are a wonderful plant for the fae. So all of these things I can incorporate on that boundary between light and dark to try and bring in the other realm into the garden where there isn't a natural hedgerow. So I think you could bring in any kind of boundary will help you cross over into another realm. But I think it's really important to focus on the whole sensory thing and making it a complete space. So for me, that's wind chimes for some movement. As Tim was talking about vibrations and, music and things like that, I think it's lovely to have that sound in the garden. Water, especially water, is fantastic to bring some life into the garden, and things like bamboos and trees, certainly anything where you can hear the wind come through to bring that air element in. But also I like to treat my garden like another room, Marla. I expect you do as well. And so take out your incense into the garden, take out some cushions and some candles, and you can create a focus point in your garden with a stone or a crystal, and really enjoy the garden as another room, as another place where you work, because gardening is a ritual in itself. Planting is a magical act. It's bringing new life into an area. But if you're planting, say if you're going to seeds, it's that whole going through the whole cycle of life, the whole cycle of the year, and there's something really satisfying about planting that little seed and watching that little seed grow. I just love that. And so I try and create a whole space that I can use as a magical altar in a way. So it's never still, like the plants are never still, but the things I put into the garden aren't still either. Cushions come in and out and candles come in and out, and there's constant movement. It's constantly fresh, and I think you're more drawn to a garden that way. If it stays the same, it becomes quite flat. The energy can become quite flat. And like you, I talk to my plants, and they're he's and she's, and they have names and everything else. And I shout at the cats because the cats jump on the plants and they all get crushed. And I've just planted a nepeta, which is a catnip. And half of my cats particularly love catnip, and the other half can't stand it. And so it's been decimated by cats eating it, and then the other cats are trying to get away from it. It is hysterical. So yeah, it's quite a battle with the cats and the dogs to actually have any garden at all, to be honest.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are also like flowers and plants that attract things from our own realm, like hummingbird vine and butterfly plants. And I also feel it's kind of important to nurture those who come around, like using hummingbird feeders, water and seed for birds, a feeder for squirrels if you have them. And, here there are a ton of birds. I mean, this is the most birdy place I've ever been in.
Oh, no.
And they nest in some of the trees. They are always in song, night and day, and it's lovely to hear them. And in my old house, I had like squirrels and possum and raccoons come on a daily basis. And that was in the middle of Hollywood, not even in the suburbs. I'm in the suburbs now. But I mean, imagine that, here they come. And of course I had to feed them. And I loved having them around. So you've got cats and what other kind of critters have you got visiting?
I've got cats and dogs, two dogs and 8 cats.
Wow.
I know, quite a menagerie I have, and hopefully we'll be adding to it soon with a hedgehog. But yeah, I'll get back to you on that one.
Aww.
But, I know, very cute. We'll see.
They're adorable.
Oh yes, yeah. Not our native ones that trundle around the garden because they'd be a bit big. But there's pygmy hedgehogs. So
yes.
we'll see. We're looking into that one at the moment. I have to talk to hubby very nicely.
They're very sweet.
Oh,
I have a friend who has one, and they're just lovely little things. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I love them. They're so cute.
She brought him to visit, and I thought, what's she got? Well, she's got a hedgehog. You know. But yeah, think hard about it because they're lovely. I mean, they're just unique and lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think, it's something a bit different. I don't have small children apart from the grandchildren, obviously, who come to visit. I've never really been much of a sort of mouse or a gerbil kind of person. But a hedgehog really takes my interest, and I'd love to learn a little bit more about them as well. Just they're so elusive here, so you don't see as much of them as we used to when I was a kid. We saw loads, but these days I think they're a lot more endangered, so you don't see as many trundling around here. So it would be lovely to actually be able to handle one and get to know the species a little bit, really.
Yeah, exactly.
But you raise a really good point, Marla, because what would our gardens be without our birds and our bees and our butterflies and all our pollinators? And so, when you're creating a garden space, it's so important to sort of bear in mind the visitors that are coming to your garden and that you need, that are going to pollinate and bring your garden alive. And you have a lot of birds, as you say. I'm terrified of birds. I know it's very sad because I can appreciate them from afar, but they do scare me. So we have a little robin that visits at the bottom of the garden, 2 robins actually, which are very lovely, as long as they stay away from me. We have lots of bees coming out of their slumber at the moment, so they're very lazy and trying to get away from the cats. And lots of butterflies. So yeah, when you're planting up a garden, it's important to remember the wildlife. And I think for me, leaving a part of the garden to be natural is a really important thing to do, because those stinging nettles and dandelions and all those things that certainly here we see everywhere out in nature, to encourage the wildlife into our garden, we need to leave a little bit of it wild. That's what they want, that's what they like, and these plants are so useful to us that it would be a shame to exclude them from the garden completely. Obviously I don't want them in my borders, but I'm quite happy for them to be in a designated wildlife bit for the birds and bees. But also, like you say, seeds for the birds, and water. We mustn't forget that they all need water. So if you've got a pond, that's fantastic. But even just a shallow dish with a couple of pebbles in it, so they can rest, the butterflies rest, and then drink from the shallow dish. Something really simple like that is great. A pile of stones for all the creepy crawlies and spiders and things. Some bamboo canes for the ladybirds. Just some really small things. And certainly if you've got children, there's nothing more fascinating for children than a spider or a ladybird. So if we can encourage them into our gardens are going to be so much better for them, because that's part of nature. That's what they do. They pollinate. They keep us all alive. And they do say that if the bees disappeared, so would we. And that's probably quite true.
I agree. And the thing is too, you can bring in like ladybirds, or we call them ladybugs, for a good reason. Like if my roses get aphids, and they haven't recently, but they have in years gone by, I've gone to the store and gotten, you get a box of 500 ladybugs or 1,000 ladybugs, and you let them loose in the yard. And that's the natural way, without using pesticides and stuff, to get rid of, aphids on your roses. And plus you've got, when you open that box and they go flying out, it's lovely. I mean, it's so nice. They'll land on you and play with you, for a minute, and then they do bite a little bit, but it's all right. Yeah, they have they nip a little bit, but they're beautiful. And so I was using that instead of spraying for aphids, which was really good. And then in my house, I had very hard soil. It was clay soil, and it
that's
needed
so
aerating a lot. And so what I did is I went to the garden center and I bought a huge box of earthworms.
brilliant.
And you let them in, and they go through it, and they aerate the soil for you. So it's using God's creatures as well to help improve your garden instead of, some of the mundane things. I mean, you're letting nature take care of nature, and I think that's important.
It is. That's so important, and it's not something that's so popular over here. We can't go to sort of somewhere and go and get some ladybirds for aphid control and things, but we can do it online and sort of mail order. We can do that, and I think that's rising in popularity quite a lot. That natural control of pest control. But obviously, there's things we can do as well. I mean, one of the most, how strange. Do you know what's just landed next to me? Bearing in mind it's 20 to 3 in the morning here, a ladybird's just landed next to me.
Aww.
And I'm in my lounge.
See?
How strange. You must have sent that. Hello, ladybird. Yes.
And if she bites you, you'll know that I did, right?
Oh, yes, it'll be you. Yes, that was very odd. Yes, where were we?
If you don't remember, I have a question from chat, so we can go
brilliant.
there. It's from Tabby, and she asks, when you plant a garden, is there a particular fae or Sid that you should appease, and what would it be? Any of the fae, the she, whatever, is there, should you do something to appease them? Maybe leave offerings or something, and what would it be?
Yeah, I always, I think that I don't sort of talk to, because I think I said to you before, I tend to converse on this plane of fae, sometimes with the underworld, but I've never gone to the higher realms yet. I haven't got there yet with the fae of the upper world. But certainly for this world, there isn't one particular fae that I would tend to go to, but my offering for the fae is two-tiered. Fae love everything sweet, so I'll normally use some sort of fairy powder, which I make, which is just sugar and blackberry leaves and, some sparkly edible sprinkle. Obviously, it's got to be biodegradable as an offering. But one of the most important things I like to plant in a garden, and certainly I will be doing that here, is an apple tree, because the apple has got so much symbolism for us on our paths, but the apple bark, little pieces of bark, if you burn it as an offering at midsummer, it's said that the fae will send you protection for the following year. So I think that if you can plant an apple tree, obviously you've got the beautiful blossom and beautiful apples. And so an apple as an offering for the fae is fantastic. But just a little bit of that bark, just once a year on Midsummer's Eve, is said to bring protection from the fae. And I've only met with the fae once in this garden. As I say, I have only been here since September last year, and because we've had winter, I haven't really been out there much until the last month or so. And I have a feeling that the bottom of my garden is going to be quite a magical place. So I'll get back to you on what fae come to me. I've heard them, but I've not actually conversed with them yet in my garden. So we'll see. But yeah, there isn't any particular fae that I tend to talk to in the garden. The one thing I would say is that whenever I go out into the space to work, because it is a magical act, it's a ritual, that I would always bless the tools that I'm working with, because they're like our wands. It's just an extension of our hands, and I always dedicate the work to either the goddess or to the earth or to the air or to the fae. And certainly when I start putting in the bluebells and everything on that line, we were talking about that boundary, my work will be dedicated to the fae. And I think that it gives you a real purpose to your work. It gives you a real magical focus to your work, and brings that energy into the soil and into everything around it. But it was a great question.
And you gave a great answer. I like that. One of the things that you mentioned earlier was that you broke the ground and started planting. And I was reading your breaking the ground ritual, which was lovely. Do you find that your gardens do better when they begin with ritual?
Yeah, definitely. Like as Tim was saying in the last hour, prayer in whatever form you take it always heightens that energy, that vibration, and it's such an important thing. It's part of my daily ritual, whether I'm inside or outside, but certainly being outside when you're breaking ground, when you're planting any plant, when you're tending any garden, even if you're just pottering around your pots on your windowsill, watering them, give it that focus, give it that ritual, because everything is better for it. You're better for it. The plants are better for it. The energy that you're putting out there is the world's better for it. And so when you're breaking ground in a garden, just giving it that focus, giving it that intent will create something magical within it. A magical space of our own outside. I mean, we're so blessed to have that. It's such a wonderful thing to be able to stand there and perform our magic and perform our rituals in our own spaces. And we go back to our forefathers. They were out in nature. It's a very different world now. So to actually have our own areas to be able to do this, it's incredible. And so something as simple as, recognising all the elements, lighting a candle on the soil, drawing a symbol, calling down the moon at full moon to bless the garden, things like that are just wonderful things to do if you're on a magical path.
Mm-hmm. And later on, I'm going to have you give out your websites and stuff so people can go and read your blog and read the ritual, because I think it doesn't have to be followed exactly the way you do it, but it's certainly a very good basis for people that don't know where to start with ritual. So I just had to bring that up because it was a gorgeous, gorgeous ritual.
Thank you.
Want to talk a little bit about herb gardens now, because they're not only for cooking up food, but they're also wonderful in cooking up spells.
Yeah.
And I had a question from the chat room about magical herbs. So I know you have some favorite herb garden basic plants. Let's start with those. What would be the basics when you're starting an herb garden?
Well, my favorite is lavender. And I think we all know lavender, and we're all really au fait with lavender as a herb. I don't know how much you cook with it over there. We don't tend to cook with it much here. I love to use it in cooking. But obviously the properties of lavender, the healing, the serenity, the peace, that's my all-time favourite. Rosemary, I think, is really important. The old folklore of plant rosemary at the gate to welcoming your visitors and protection. Rosemary is just such a pungent, beautiful herb, and also for memory. It's fantastic for memory. I used to always give my daughter a sprig of rosemary when she went to her exams. And in fact, when she went to university, I actually sent her down a plant of rosemary so she could have it for university. Sage is another one. So sage and thyme, both classic herbs. Obviously sage for wisdom, thyme for healing, and I love all that old folklore of thyme heals all wounds. It's not just true as time as in the clock, Thyme as a plant is incredibly healing, and sage, the old sage as we call it, the wisdom side of things. Those are really basic herbs that I would put in to any garden, but I like to kind of mix them up with my borders as well. So I love to have lavender and rosemary next to roses. Roses are, for me, they're absolutely essential in any garden, as your little he one is to you. And I think that the evocative smell and the what they stand for, the love, can exude across the garden. I think they're amazing. But other herbs, mint obviously is a fantastic one for money spells. and obviously really cleansing as well. So those would probably be my real basic ones, just to sort of get you going. And the thing is with gardening, it's a little bit like magic. You kind of learn as you go along, but it's really important never to walk before you can run, because if you get it wrong in gardening and you go to, as we know, if you go to eat something that you shouldn't eat, you've planted something wonderful, you think you can eat it, it can have terrible effects. I mean, like the foxglove. Foxglove is a wonderful, wonderful medicinal herb that we can't use as medicine. The pharmaceutical industry are very good at using extracts of it and things, but we should never eat it and we should never use it medicinally. But foxgloves, for me, magically, are a wonderful, wonderful plant. And they're another plant that connect really well with the fae. So, it's the folk legend of the foxglove. It used to be called foxglove, and it's a lovely little story that the fae gave foxes the foxglove to wear as gloves, so they wouldn't get caught stealing the chickens out of the coops. And it's said to offend the fairies if you pick foxgloves, but if they steal your baby, the juice of a foxglove will help bring it back, which is just a wonderful, wonderful folklore. I just think it's just so beautiful. These little stories that we tend to lose, but you have to know what you're doing with plants. So a really safe way of doing it is to start with those basics, just with those lavender, sage, all these ones that we know from culinary shows, that we know from our mum's gardens or our grandma's gardens. Start with the real basic ones and learn to work with them, feel the vibrations, learn the energies, and see. I mean, I use thyme for healing. That's my go-to healer. I know people use other things, and that's good too. It has to resonate with you, because we're all individuals, and so what works for me wouldn't necessarily work for somebody else. But the vibration of the plant will let you know what it to be used for. But I would say that the one plant, if you're going to plant one herb, plant the rosemary. That's the standalone plant that you can use in any spell to give that herbal property or boost to a spell. It's the universal herb for spells. So if you don't want to get complicated with lots of different herbs and a pinch of this and a pinch of that, rosemary will do the job for you perfectly well.
We have a question in the chat. She's asking, what does thyme heal?
Well,
thinking,
you've got a cough too. I've got one too.
I mean, everything heals in time. No, that's a bad pun. But how do you use thyme to heal?
How do I use thyme to heal? Well, one of the ways, obviously, thyme is wonderful to cook with. So if you put thyme into anything, that's one way of using its healing properties. Obviously, you can charge any herb to use it for healing, and if you charge your thyme, which is basically beginner's guide to charging, if you can put some in your hand, hold your hands together and focus your intent, like Tim was talking about vibrations and energy, focus that into the thyme and ask for it to be used for that specific purpose. One of the nice ways of using thyme for healing, well, actually there's two. One is for to make an infusion, so make a tea. Especially works well with lemon thyme, so that's really good for clearing. So if you're wanting to heal something like a virus or a cold, lemon thyme is fantastic. The other way to use thyme for healing, physical healing, is in a steam bath. So nice hot water with lots of thyme in it, and towel over your head over the steam, and inhale that. And whilst you're inhaling it, you're visualising the thyme healing going through your system. And that's wonderful. Magically, in spell work, I would use thyme. I would maybe pop some into some incense, or even, if somebody's feeling a bit low or a bit out of sorts, a bit disconnected, it's really lovely to pop under the pillow, because it can kind of heal gently while you sleep. It's quite a gentle healing herb. So I think, that time's a great one to use in any healing. So anything that you want to do, create poppets. Even just if you're sending a get well card, or just if somebody's a little bit low and you're sending a letter, or just pop a little sprig of thyme in the post to them and just say, time heals all wounds, and that you've charged it for healing. And I think that might be a really nice idea to help somebody along.
Yeah. I think it's a great idea. I was kind of nosing around your Facebook page, and I'm a stalker. I was just looking for information. And I saw a post about using crystals in your plants to add color to texture and also a little magic. So aside from the aesthetics, what purpose do crystals serve in the garden? And how would one choose which crystal went with what plant? Or is it that it just comes to you as you're going?
Well, do you know what, Marla? I am still very much learning about crystals. It's not... Whereas... the person at the moment on my Facebook page, I'm having a few days break, and the reason being is my daughter's getting married. So we're in the middle of wedding plans, and the wedding actually is on May the 1st on Beltane. So it's absolute chaos here at the moment, as you can imagine. So my friend Karen, who is the crystal guru, is posting at the moment, and she knows everything about crystals. And say I'm very much a beginner. But using crystals in the garden is just, it's so magical. I tend to use things that complement the plants that I love. And so for me, I use things like rose quartz and amethyst. If you've got a really sunny garden, maybe just to bring in some citrine and things like that, just to complement the energy levels of your garden. I think that if you can match a crystal to the energy, it kind of amplifies it. I find if I add a crystal to anything, it will amplify the magic. I absolutely love using crystals, especially in pot plants around the home, because it kind of magnifies. They can be such a tiny plant, but it kind of magnifies their energy for me. Crystals and water as well. If you've got a pond, or just even as we were saying about the little feeding water bowl for the birds and butterflies and things. If you pop a couple of crystals in there as little resting places, that's wonderful. But of course, my favourite for gardens, especially in the summer, is moonstone. And it doesn't have to be a big piece, it only has to be a little piece, and you can use it as a focus. And let's not forget, our gardens they're out there for us 24 hours a day. And so sometimes, I'm a night owl, I'm fine being up all night, but sometimes it's quite nice to go out in your garden because it's a different energy. And so when you're planning on planting your garden, think about bringing in the crystals, not only that will work during the day, like citrine for sun and things like that, but bring in some that will work at night time as well, like the clear quartzes and the moonstones to reflect the moon, and think about your planting. So like you've got jasmine, the scent in the evening and at night is just amazing.
Oh, it's beautiful, yes.
Oh, gorgeous. Night stock, evening primrose, Casablanca lilies, all of those sort of things, that white plants that shine out and reflect the moon, turn your space into something completely different at night and give you a whole another set of tools to use magically. So bringing crystals in to use like that, I think their energy just amplifies what's around them for me. But as I say, I'm still very much learning. I'm still very much a beginner when it comes to crystals. And it's funny, plants will stick in my head and recipes and things will stay in my head. But when it comes to crystals, it goes flying out the window. and I have a job to remember, so I kind of stick to the basics.
Well, it grows on you, and soon enough it kind of becomes second nature, as you know.
I hope so.
Takes a little time and maybe a little rosemary for the memory.
Absolutely.
Okay, I've got Tabby in the chat room. Can you fit in one last question? She said, is there a particular plant or herb that will help with the health and fitness of a pond fish? She has some beautiful koi fish in the pond.
Well, the fish. I love feeding the fish, and I really am hoping that I'm going to get some fish very soon in the garden. In fact, I will quickly just share with you that there will be 3 fish, one for each of my granddaughters, who have decided that they are going to be called Elsa, after Frozen, who that's all that ever seems to be on the television. One of the others is going to be called Peppa, after Peppa Pig. I don't know if you get Peppa Pig over there, but
I've not heard of it, but
no, we get lots of this very annoying pink pig on the telly, and the other one apparently is going to be called Grape, and I really don't know why. So, I have no idea, but Elsa and Peppa and Grape will hopefully be joining me in a pond very, very soon. Oh, the fish. The fish are obviously water element. One thing that might help with the fish, because I wouldn't like to add anything herbal or any extracts to the water. Obviously, pond plants are fantastic, and I don't know if you can get water mint over there. We have water mint here, and that is because mint is cleansing. It's a really nice plant to add to a pond. So I would suggest water mint if you're going to add anything to the pond. And the other thing that I would maybe look at placing into the pond is charging, like we were talking, charging a crystal. Maybe just a really nice clear quartz, which has got a universal energy, and charging that for healing, and just popping that into the pond, which will just, the energy will resonate around the pond, and hopefully that healing will help the fish. But definitely water mint would be my go-to plant in a pond for any sort of healing. And I really hope her fish has better names than the ones that mine are going to have.
Oh, yours have lovely names. I like Grape. That's my favorite one.
Right.
And I hope she has kind of a purple tinge to it too.
Oh,
well,
yeah.
There's also green grape, so hey, I think that's really good. All right, I've got one final question for you. There are a lot of people who have been listening to the show who really want to garden, but are sure that they have a brown thumb and will kill everything when they try to grow it. So have you got any words of wisdom for those who don't quite trust their gardening abilities?
Oh, bless. Everybody starts somewhere. We all started somewhere, and I always swore that I'd never be able to grow anything. And I have to admit, I struggle with houseplants. My words of wisdom are, you can do it. You just believe in yourself and go out there and do it. You ask the goddess, you ask the gods, you ask Mother Nature for your help and guidance, and you go out there and you do it, because you know what? It doesn't matter as long as you try. We can all do it. We're all magical. And the whole thing about gardening and the energies, and it's all about touching nature, getting back in touch with nature. And like we said, planting it's a ritual. Gardening is a ritual. And so if you're just doing it, if you're just starting out, or you're worried you're going to kill anything, keep it small, keep to things you understand, but just do it. We can all have a go. We can all make a difference. And it's really empowering. And that one little plant that you put in there and you're not sure you're going to kill, if you go back to in a week's time, the birds will have been at it, the bees, the spiders, and you've added that, and you've added your energy into that space as well. So just get on and enjoy it. And
I will just say that if I made that bare root rose grow, anybody could do it. Because I was petrified. Because I've always gotten roses, that were started already and had leaves and thorns and everything.
You know what? Even the most experienced gardener, they come across things that scare the hell out of them. But the thing is, as witches, we find magic in the world all around us. It's about joy and about enjoyment and raising that vibration and giving out that thanks and celebrating the wheel of the year and the seasonal changes and getting out in the earth and putting your hands in the soil, even if just to touch a daisy or a dandelion. If you can get out and do it, that's magic.
Yes. And the magic is always in us. It's in the plants. It's in the world around us. So we need to take advantage of that.
Absolutely. We're so blessed.
Well, Mandy, thank you so much for coming in tonight. Quickly, can I have you tell people where they can find out more about you and stuff?
Well, okay. So mainly I'm on Facebook. That tends to be my go-to place. So you can find me on Facebook as Mandy Mitchell, author of Hedgewitch Book of Days. On Twitter, it's twitter.com/Mandy Hedgewitch. And the website is mandyhedgewitch.wix.com/Mandy Hedgewitch. And a quick, if I may, shout out to a lady over there in the US who's listening tonight, dear Shawnee, who runs a little witchy shop in an old ways shop in Lynchburg, Virginia. And she runs courses from there. And I know they're all listening tonight. So hi, Shawnee, and all the guys over there. And just thank you, Marla. Thank you so much. It's so lovely to have a natter with you.
Well, we're going to do it again because everybody loves you. And I think if I had you on every week for a month, nobody would complain.
Oh,
so,
I think they'd be quite bored.
Oh, I don't think so at all. But anyway, we can talk about that later. Thank you so much again. And stay put. And we'll say proper goodbyes when we're done. And everybody, thank you for joining in tonight. Glad you liked the show. And until next time, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at this same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2014. Moonlight Hall by Kevin MacLeod. Licensed through Incompetech.com.